Well,
right, okay, I'm going to start today's session. Can I say good morning to everyone? I believe I'm joined by Liz. Hi, Liz.
Hi.
And also Gareth. Hi, Gareth.
Hi, Malcolm.
And Laura is on holiday this week, and I haven't heard from Kevin or Naomi, but Naomi's just back from holiday, so I expect she's probably swamped.
Naomi's here, be careful what you say.
Oh, Naomi's here.
Morning.
Hi, Naomi.
Hello, everyone.
Did you enjoy your holiday?
I loved it. Really nice. Thank you.
Okay, I expect you're glad to be back, aren't you?
Thrilled.
Right, okay, and Kevin will catch up with us, I guess, if he's not been called away for something. Okay, so let's just go through again. Housekeeping, just for anybody who's new. If you want to join in the conversation, we're very, very keen that all of you do join in the conversation. So please raise your hand. We'll open up your lines so that you can join in. Yeah, if you don't want to join in by raising your hands, then you can type obviously into the discussion box that runs in this particular team, and Nick will make certain I'm aware of what you're saying. Okay, so the key discussion point today is going to be the national insurance contributions. That was what was raised in the WhatsApp group as being what you wanted to talk about. So we'll do that. But before we do that, I just want to have as normal, a quick look at the stats. I know I normally make a fairly cursory glance at the stats, and we'll be doing the same. But I have noticed some movement starting in the stats that we have. Now, again, if you're new to this is about people who are applying. This is not about caseload. So this looks at the work that is coming in, and just coming in through the BET system for our customers. But it does give us some kind of indication of where the customers are. So this is the slide that shows the number of people who start the process. They don't necessarily have any involvement whatsoever, but they certainly start the process. And whilst the trend is still showing that it's pretty even, I think for the last couple of weeks, we can see that there's been a drop in the number of people who are making early applications, and that's drawing it back down really to the 2018, which is where I suspect it will actually settle down to. And what I suspect, Gareth, your view on this is that this will probably continue to drop, do you think?
I guess so. I think it really does depend upon the employment market, obviously, what happens there. We still don't really know what the impact of furloughs and MIF and so forth are going to be on how much people intend to carry on and how much they're able to carry on. Yes,
absolutely. And that slide tends to show how people feel about their incomes. They're making some application. This one is the calculation, which is people who have a likelihood possibility of claiming. And again, that has returned really to the 2019 level at the moment. So that is showing that that's a fairly straight line trend. And then people who get through the calculation, so are likely to have some entitlement. That is really back again to the 2019 level, and again is showing fairly even at this stage. So I just thought it's worth having a look at those trends. Liz, is that what you would expect as well? Have we lost Liz?
No, it's me. I was on mute.
Okay.
I've unmuted myself. Yes, I think that's reasonably what would be expected.
Yeah, and Naomi, is that what you're experiencing as well?
Yes, we are now seeing small reductions in both the housing benefit and also council tax reduction. Obviously from next month with the universal credit, £20 a week going, we might see some people floating off universal credit.
Yeah, and then what happens to them for CTR and your policy?
Well, then they'll have to have a reassessment of their entitlement.
Okay, so
Malcolm,
sorry.
Yeah, Malcolm, it's Kevin here.
Hi, Kevin.
Our CTR caseload has gone down as well as our HB, as well as the £20 uplift. It'll be interesting to see what the impact of closing the £20 uplift, the job furloughs, as someone's already stated, what impact that has as well.
Yeah, I mean, particularly against a buoyant job market as well. That may offset, might it not, the impacts that we were expecting to see from the furlough.
Yeah, but don't forget the people who are on the furlough the longest, not in every case, will probably the people who will probably be less prone to get a job back in again. So that would be an interesting one.
All right. Okay. Well, we'll continue to monitor those stats, and highlight anything that starts to look interesting. They say they're not caseload. That's just people applying. So presumably caseloads are remaining. Well, as Naomi said, Naomi spoke about caseloads. Right. Okay. Let's move to Kevin. Your council tax and business rates update.
Not really much to report on this. The bill for the MCC COVID reliefs went through the reading stage last Thursday with few changes. So I think there's one more stage to go through in the Commons. It then goes to the Lords. Royal Assent is still a long way away. No sign of the guidance yet, because the discussion is that we won't get the guidance for the reliefs, the further discretionary relief for those until it's got given Royal Assent. We're taking enforcement action against those cases, and we may well have issues further down the road with reliefs when we put costs on. Various issues on business rates. Expanded retail discount is down compared to before. We've got an application form process. We're running about 45% of applications before, and our collection rate as a result of that is down because we've insisted on an application form because of fraud with the cash cap. Grants continue unabated. As I said before, we've finished paying our grants, including the ARG, but the administration for the grants is never ending, as you would have found from a long email last week that came in about a whole variety of different things. On council tax, it's still difficult to collect. Nothing really changes on council tax to any great degree. Obviously, we've got waiting in the wings the review of business rates and some changes from the local list to the central list, which could have mitigating factors on your council tax, or issues on your council tax will create that. So just watch this space. I still think it's going to be tough collecting money over the next 2, 3, 4, 5 years.
Yeah, I should imagine that would be the case, and particularly, I mean, there's going to be a combination, isn't it, Kevin? I mean, for households, it's going to be tough. We've discussed this in previous weeks that,
I think it is going to be tough. Breathing space hasn't really taken off to any great degree yet, whether that will when breathing space comes in. There's 1 or 2 issues with 1 or 2 companies on breathing space. But I think the issues will come further down the road, because the new normal is probably going to be very, very different. Because you look on the trains, there's not the same number of. I'll take my own local station. It's about a third full when you go in at midday to try and catch a train. You never used to be able to get a car park space. So I think a lot of people are still working from home. That impacts upon the shopping centres. It impacts upon the local coffee shops. I mean, the high streets more than the shopping centres. There's some huge issues here, and are some businesses sustainable, or are they going to have to adapt to make themselves sustainable? Some big questions still to be answered.
Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Kevin at all? Nick, can anybody raising their hand?
Yes, Lynn's got her hand up now.
Hi guys. Kevin, I wonder what you thought about the reports in the newspapers this weekend that apart from the national insurance hike that they think will go to the NHS, there were talks of council tax rises to pay for social care.
You could never say never with council tax, and Malcolm, you may want to cover this later on, so I won't steal your thunder at this stage.
Yeah, thanks, Kevin. Yeah, it is part of the next discussion. It's a good point, Lynn, but yeah, it forms part of the next session. Has anybody
Okay,
else?
fine, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Lynn. No, it's not a problem. You're asking the right questions. So, has anybody else got questions for Kevin at all? Let me see.
No, and we're all questioned out.
Can I chip in with a question for Kevin, if I might? And it's really sort of speculative, which is, what's the situation going to be around business rates for a company that just decides to put everybody working from home and just loses their corporate offices completely?
Good question. My view on that is it depends what the usage of the building is, because you would still need the use of the building, the technology and everything else. So it doesn't necessarily mean, because if you put the office out, the office is actually empty. So if they move the furniture out as well, that's an empty rate, which gives them added problem because they don't qualify for the grants or a lot of the reliefs. And we've got particular cases in our area where they've done just that and they've got absolutely nothing because we're still charging them empty rates.
But if they sell the building and there's just some kind of centralized IT thing on a server in the Far East, and all the people who work for it are working from their own homes, is
Well,
there
if they sell
anything
the
to
building, the building goes to the new owner, of course, or demolished or whatever. So, but whilst they're getting a beneficial interest from that building, it doesn't necessarily mean that they won't pay business rates.
I'm just thinking whether there's any liability on the individuals who are working from home, given that then effectively becomes a decentralized office, I suppose.
As it stands at the moment, no, because that would be covered under council tax. However, if the VOA deem their home working to be an office, that's a whole separate issue. But generally, if you're going through the same door into your house and into your office as what you're doing going into your house, they won't rate that as a separate business.
That could change, though, couldn't it, Kevin? If basically
rating law could always change.
Yeah.
Or rating precedent.
Yeah, and actually, isn't from the valuation office. I mean, the determination of
yeah, it's not for local authorities.
All
we can do is advise. Once they've put it in the list, regardless of it, we're stuck with it.
Yeah.
Even if we disagree with it, we're stuck with it. We can go back to them, but we can only advise.
No. Okay. All right. That's a good question, Gareth. I think we may end up returning to that one, I suspect, over the month to come. Right. Let's as Lynn led us into this conversation. I've lost my mouse. There we go. Let's go into this one. I've just put a bit of the WhatsApp conversation on there. You started this conversation, didn't you, about the cuts to NIC? So do you want to pick that up? And Laura's not with us, but we've got Laura's answer there.
Yeah, that's interesting. I mean, I posed that question because, well, obviously I wanted to know what the answer was, but I wanted to be assured that the working pensioners were only going to pay the social care levy and not full national insurance contributions on their earnings, and I believe that is the case, as does Laura. And at the time, there had been nothing said about the social care precept in council tax. But Laura, in her investigative frame of mind, has actually found out that at the time she talked to them, they hadn't decided what to do, but I understand that local authorities are going to be able to raise the percentage that they charge for the social care precept, which I think has come out by some various means, probably in the press, that instead of, what is it currently, 3%, isn't it, that they can levy for?
They can up to 3% without facing a referendum.
Yep.
Yeah.
Well, that I believe that's going to rise.
It could well do.
Yeah, which is, as we know, I mean, I think the worry around all this is, of course, that, you know, council tax is not a progressive tax, it's a regressive tax. And consequently, I think you can determine from that exactly how much money is going to reach local authorities in the short term until the NHS have taken their cut. And in fact, how long that will continue? Will that go on for longer than 5 years?
So, Lynn, you started to raise this question. Do you want to add to this conversation at all?
That's just sort of made me think about other things that could or couldn't happen. I mean, where obviously there's a huge financial gap now because of all the money that was thrown into the pandemic, quite rightly. But I've just made me think more about what is a more simple solution to raise the funding. And it's something that I think a lot of people have said for a very, very long time, is single person discount. It's just made me think about how councils can get more money to be used in other ways. And I think it's been long mooted that removing single person discount, I know it won't happen because of pensioners, but I don't think pensioners have been affected much until now, where the point that Liz has raised about the working pensioners, you know, is the national thing, national insurance thing, going to sway pensioners away from the Conservatives, or if they, you know, what's the less of two evils?
Gareth, can I ask a question of you? I mean, is this, because at a local level in Wales, has this been something they've been discussing, perhaps removing single person discount?
Not that I'm aware of, no. And I think the same arguments kind of apply there. I think the social care levy bit's going to be really quite an interesting one for Wales, because of course social care is devolved as it is in Scotland and Northern Ireland, but national insurance isn't. So there's a compulsory kind of chunk of money calculated under the Barnett formula that will be heading to Wales. And I know that there's quite a lot of discussion about what do we do with it and how does it get used and will it be enough? I've just put a link in the chat, by the way, Markham, to a calculator that we produced that compares current kind of tax and NI against the version with the levy. And it covers things like pensioners and self-employed, unemployed, and Scottish tax as well. So if anyone wants to click on that link, you get a picture of the kind of sums that are involved for different sorts of individuals.
Okay, that's really excellent. And if you want to put it into the WhatsApp group as well, Gareth.
Yeah, we'll do.
Yeah, and I'll circulate it when I write out.
Malcolm,
we're also working at the moment, slaving over a calculator that will compare social care charging as it is under the current rules and as it will be under the post kind of levy situation, and that I think is already starting to look really, really interesting.
Okay, thanks, Gareth. Yeah, Kevin.
What I would also say on council tax, we've tried to do the single person discount many a time, and there's not been the political appetite to change that because they think it's the elderly that would be affected, the elderly widow. But are things changing? I don't know. Local authorities are struggling for money. I don't think the government's in a position to give them added money. So it'll be very interesting to see what happens, because very clearly in the past, if we've got over a certain percentage, we've faced a referendum, full stop. Whether that will happen, e.g. with social adult care, I don't know. In respect of that, I don't know. But how local authorities can pay for their services going forward, there's got to be some give and take.
I mean, I get the sense in the styles of different governments, which is perhaps party political and perhaps not party political. It's difficult to really tell. The question of referenda is one that I don't get a sense that this government is particularly keen on. I know the Cameron government was keen on it. I don't know where the May government was on it, but this Johnson government doesn't seem to be particularly keen on the idea of referenda. So, do you think that'll play into that, Kevin?
I think a number of factors have changed the goalposts, because they weren't going to do a levy on NI, and COVID has changed that, the adult social care. They weren't going to put up things. They've had to, because they've got to pay for the help and finances they've given. Whereas I would have thought a year ago or 18 months ago, things were completely off the table. I wouldn't say things are completely off the table, but things being on the table and things being actually actioned are two entirely different things. I think they're testing the water to see what they can probably do and what they can't do. They do seem very good at doing that. So I think watch this space. I think we're going to bear the brunt of it on an ongoing basis in local government. I've got no doubt about that.
If there's any Scottish authorities on, I'd be quite interested to hear if anybody knows what Scotland's approach to all of this is. I mean, we had the Scottish IRV conference, and that was quite lively last week. Quite a lot of interesting stuff. I mean, there's a lot going on in Scotland at the moment. Is anybody on there from Scotland that would like to give us an update? Can you see Nick, please?
No one's putting a hand up. I don't know if anyone on there is from a Scottish authority. Someone type something.
Someone did say some local authorities are looking at their CTR schemes for next year to reduce their impacts. It's quite interesting. I think a number are thinking of introducing banded income schemes, but a number of making the scheme more generous.
Yeah, that's true. But in Scotland, it's like
100% anyway.
It's a national scheme, and
yes.
There doesn't seem to have been much appetite, I don't think, for banded schemes. I mean, banded schemes, Liz, I'm right in saying banded schemes are definitely not progressive, are they?
No. And also they're also, in my view, and I could be wrong, the bans themselves are quite arbitrary. I'm not entirely sure what, if you look at some of them, I'm not entirely sure what the calculation is behind the bans. Sometimes it's almost as though somebody's just thrown a dart at something and said, well, this will be a good place to start and this will be a good place to end one ban. But I don't know,
I think you're being unfair. It's not almost, it's definitely as if they've thrown a dart at it.
Isn't that the same with the applicable amounts?
I'm being too fair, you mean?
Okay,
yeah, well, that's absolutely.
I mean, one of the problems quite clearly is that, to be fair, local authorities do not have the kind of in-house expertise that you need to do this sort of development and design and modelling and so on. So you're bound pretty much to get some kind of random guesses almost at the amounts. I mean, banding is attractive in some ways because it's kind of simple, but it's appalling in its effects.
But I'm going to defend local authorities a bit because I mean, quite a lot of local authorities have paid quite a lot of money to get in outside companies to do some kind of work around what the impacts on these would be. I mean, even if we accept the points that are being made that they're kind of random, the percentages, etc. The still local authorities are bringing in companies to see what the impact of the different percentages would be in order to mitigate some of that risk. I mean, it doesn't change the fact that it's not progressive and the rest of it. But is that not true, Gavin? There's not some effort to try and mitigate?
Welcome, Naomi's patiently waiting.
Oh yes, Naomi. Yes, please, Naomi, come in.
It's one of those.
Sorry, I forgot about you.
It's all right.
Naomi.
She's
mute.
Those rogue authorities that did operate or does operate a banded scheme, we did actually put an awful lot of thought into it. We compared the old scheme to the new scheme. We tried to make sure that as few people were as disadvantaged as possible. We also looked at working patterns within our authority, how many people were working up to 10 hours a week, up to 16, 20, 24, etc., etc., and to try and have a band that's reflective of our local working patterns. Banded, yes, you do always have a cliff edge, but you do also within that have increasing your employment incentives as well, because you can get more money into the household without it impacting on the CTR, the council tax you have to pay. So it is, I suppose, a double-edged sword. And touch wood, we've been operating it for 18 months now, and we've not had a complaint from any of our CTR applicants. They seem happy with it. And if we hadn't had the scheme last year, we wouldn't have been able to have operated because of the number of claims that we had coming in.
So the options for claimants, if they are unhappy with the banding, is they may say they want to go to valuation tribunal, but the valuation tribunal can't do anything about it, can they? It's right outside of their remit.
No, they can't. They can't go to the VT for how we're operating our due scheme. They can apply under the discretionary scheme for a period of time. We can work with people to increase their hours if they've just gone from one threshold to another, for instance. We have links with CAB for debt recovery. We have external links for employment support as well.
And do you think, Naomi?
We have a banded income scheme too, and I'd agree with Naomi's comments. Our authority looked very carefully at it.
Yeah, I think the majority of schemes now are banded income, aren't they, Kevin?
There are a number, yes. I'll send you a report after this, Malcolm. You may have seen it, you may not have done, but I'll send it to you, and that tells you how many there are.
Yeah, okay. And I mean, quickly, Jake, I know you're out there somewhere. I mean, we have to make certain that we record all the different schemes for each local authority into our systems. Would you say that banded income schemes are holding the sway at the moment?
I'm not sure. I mean, one of the strange things is there's multiple different banded schemes, but it's sort of 50-50, and we've got quite a lot of Scottish customers. So obviously that's just the one scheme. I mean, we've seen more and more popping up as the years have gone by. But yeah, I'm not sure if they're in the majority for our customers just yet.
Okay, thanks. Yeah.
Malcolm, we've got a couple of hands up, but I just want to repeat something John Gibbs has put in the comments, and whether John wants to speak after is up to him. But John's saying the Scottish CTR regs for next April are aimed at treating UC recipients in the same way as non-UC, i.e. will use the same applicable amounts and earnings and childcare disregards. As far as possible, LAs will be able to use the UC data feed. So that's what John's come back with in relation to Scotland.
That's what I thought was happening up in Scotland. It's quite different approach. Happy to have John if he wants to speak. You say somebody else would like to?
A couple of hands up. Yeah, I didn't know who went first. I've got Sean and Liz, so I don't know if who you want to go first there. I didn't see who had their hand up first.
We'll have Sean in, then Liz.
Go ahead, Sean.
Hi, guys. For those who've got the banded scheme, I'm just wondering how much of a reduction in workload it has actually produced.
Well, that's a really good question, Sean. If anybody'd like to...
Thank you, Sean, for that particular question. Can I say we introduced our banded income scheme on the 1st of April 2020. It wasn't probably the best year to establish how different it would have been compared to a normal year. But I would say it has definitely saved us a lot of work to what would have been the work coming in as a result of COVID. to substantiate a percentage for it, I think would virtually be impossible. And I've got more important things to do. So I'm hoping that none of my members ask the same question you've just done.
I'd also agree with Kevin. It is very difficult to quantify the savings because you don't really have much to benchmark against. We've not had a normal year for several years. However, I would say that it has saved us time and effort. We've worked very hard last year to try and automate as much of the processing as possible into the back office system. And that has meant that our officers have been able to deal with the terrible year that we've had, or terrible 18 months. But it has been very beneficial, I think, to our customers who the previous year were seeing changes on a monthly basis for some of how much entitlement they were getting. And it was very disruptive to our council tax colleagues in trying to have a robust recovery for the authority.
But would you not be still getting those monthly changes?
We do, but they make no difference if they're in the same band.
So that's the reduction.
Yeah. So if they only change by a few pounds a month, then yes, we receive the information in because of the work that we've done. It's automated. So we get the data feed in from DWP. It reassesses their entitlement and goes, no, there's no change, carry on. So if the charge payer hasn't kept up with their agreed instalments, that will then start to feed into the set recovery profile. If there is a change, then there is a change and they're notified of any changes to their instalments.
So those at the band level, so let's say you have one band starting at £201, another and the previous band ending at the 200. Those at the in between level are likely to get more changes to their council tax bill.
Only if they step between one band and another.
Quite often, some might, pub worker.
We found that it hasn't. Whereas previously we were getting, I think it was an average of about 9 changes for a universal credit customer, where there are small changes in their salary. That has dropped to 3 changes under our banded scheme.
Yeah, I did do some work around the savings on against simplifying the scheme. Paul and I did some work about 5 years ago now, I think. The calculations that we came out with was that local authorities could make between 60 and 75% reductions on their administration costs when simplifying the scheme. Which we suggested they could use the money to offset by having better supporting schemes for 13C.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And also, what was the cost? Because if you're a small district, then you're spending a lot of money for the county as opposed to.
We were trying to make it within a similar cash envelope. Now, that was very difficult with the year that we had for 2020, 2021, because of the sharp increase of customers, claimants. So, yeah, the modelling was based on, and actually was fairly close, had we not had the increase in applications.
Okay, that's quite interesting, isn't it? Right. I think Liz wanted to speak. Did she not?
I did, but it's really a negligible question. What Naomi was saying about having had no complaints in relation to the banded scheme, I was sort of thinking, as you pointed out, I mean, there's little remedy for anybody who does complain. But let's say you had a lot of complaints about the banded scheme. I mean, is the only way of actually sorting it out or making it not fairer is to actually have another consultation on the same scheme?
Yes, I think that is right. I think that has to be a trigger. In any area, if you are receiving significant numbers of complaints, you're duty bound surely to look at your processes, procedures, and do something about it.
And if the normal remedies don't apply, then actually I think it's absolutely right that the only way to go forward is to ask for a reaffirmation of the scheme or make some tweaks. But it still needs to change to the scheme or not.
Yeah, I can bring some experience to this, Liz, because the Oxford scheme certainly got challenged in 1 year. The mailboxes for the councillors absolutely groaned. But it's a kind of tricky one because when they realised that they'd got it wrong, as it were, we were faced with an awful lot of appeals to the valuation office, who were dead keen to pick them up, and went to the wall with me over the fact that I wasn't prepared to attend or even countenance any valuation office appeals on this subject, as they had they had no powers. I mean, we ended up going back to the VO solicitors on this. But on the other hand, we had to consider what we were going to do about it. And of course, you can't actually change the scheme mid-year.
No, of course not.
So it was a case of having to address it through top-up payments. And that's the way it had to be addressed. And then, I mean, actually, Oxford decided to drop the changes that it had introduced that particular year. But Naomi's right, you'd have to take it back to consultation.
Well, definitely if you changed it. But I mean, my point here is that, I mean, it actually, as part of localism, the council considered it was still a fair scheme and they wanted to continue operating it.
But once you've adopted the scheme, you can't change it in year. You have to actually go through into the following year.
That's exactly what I'm saying. I know you can't change it in year. So your only option, if that was the case, I suppose what I'm saying in a customer focused way, is possibly to hold a consultation for the new year based on the same scheme.
Well, yes, you can do. But the one thing I would say about consultation is it's a pretty blunt tool.
Yeah, I agree.
And actually, it's in order to make consultation work, you've got to have people to participate. And I've looked at a lot of consultations by local authorities. Hopefully, Naomi will support this. No matter how much a local authority does in order to promote a consultation, they'll still turn out a very small number of people who will comment on the schemes, and that gets really difficult because if you think about the scheme that tendering introduced, where they wouldn't pay people or wouldn't give council tax to working families who hadn't been in the area for 5 years, of which 2 other local authorities adopted on varying schemes, and of course. One local authority, Sandwell, ended up going to court over it and losing. But you see, the argument was that 75% of the population supported that particular position. But when you looked at the consultation documents when they came through, that was on a number that was less than 10. It wasn't reasonable to argue that 75% of the population supported it.
It's also fair to say, I think, and you have to say this, is that the consultations are very rarely open enough. You tend to get kind of a number of alternatives. And when I've looked at consultations, and I have to say I'm one of the difficult people that puts in responses to these kind of things. None of the options would have been what I would have considered to be acceptable, but there's no way of going outside those very tightly bounded choices in the consultations that I've looked at. I think people just don't go back to the fundamentals, but the idea that council tax benefit or rate rebates or council tax reductions and so forth should have an aim of making sure that people who can't afford to pay the bill because their circumstances have worsened are protected. And that, I guess, is one of my complaints about banded schemes.
Malcolm?
I agree, Malcolm, that it's very difficult doing the consultations when you have perhaps 50 respondents. That is very difficult to then say it's not a ringing endorsement for or against the schemes that you're proposing. For us, particularly, it's quite a generous scheme. It's based on 100% of the liability. We have, although we've had the banded scheme, we had a 1-year transitional protection. And out of the consultation, we did change slight parameters for that in a positive way. But, 50 respondents, it's not much to hang your hat on. But what I have found beneficial is the lack of negative comments in the last 18 months since we've been live. And I know that's after the fact, but I do think that validates where we were going with this. And we're fortunate that it was deemed that we wanted to be in the same cash envelope. We weren't looking to save money.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you, Naomi. I mean, you do have to look at the stuff that comes in afterwards, because, I remember part of my debate with the valuation office was there was a consultation period. They had time to enter into the consultation. You think about how political parties are structured within local areas. There's plenty of opportunity for them to come in as groups and to discuss these. And they don't, so you have to rely on what happens after the scheme is up and running. There is nothing else if people won't engage. So I agree with you, Naomi.
I've worked for several authorities, and I agree completely that in the majority, actually, you don't get. It's not real consultation, and I think the highest I've ever seen is something like 103 replies. And I agree with Gareth that actually a lot of the questions are closed questions and generally designed to get the answers that people want. Maybe that's a bit harsh. But actually, in one authority I've worked for, there was a lot of interest, and there were a lot of large interest groups, Zacharias and other local groups, who came in and answered to the consultation. And actually, that did mean that members slightly lost their nerve, and it was changed after the consultation. So you're right, Malcolm. It needs, perhaps, shall we say, I don't want to describe them as lobby groups, but that's what they are, larger groups to come in, and that otherwise you really haven't got a lot to go on.
Yes, and actually Zacharias has taken most legal cases as well. I mean, they're quite diligent on these things. I mean, one of the things I think quite interests me is that local authorities will spend money on trying to estimate the impacts of the changes that they want to make. But actually, I've not seen very many local authorities spend money on the consultation process. So they don't put the consultation out to companies who know how to do consultations. They try to run them internally, and then you do end up with an awful lot of closed questions or nowhere to go if you don't agree with the the options that are put before you.
Malcolm?
Yeah.
A couple of things, just make you aware of time. It's 12:44, but people have stayed on. We're not losing anyone at the minute. Sean's still patiently got his hand up.
Okay.
And Lynn's also popped her hand up. So if we go to Sean,
let's hear from both Sean and from Lynn, and then I'll start to close down.
Okay. I have some experience on very successful consultation because I did quite famous one in Essex. And yes, the tendering one was a very closed consultation, and it had been designed by Essex County Council. It was a one fits all, but the council where I was at in Essex decided to go completely different. That ended up with national publicity and ended up with about 400 consultation returns. But they were open question. They were fully open questions, and they also weren't misleading. In the Essex one, in the later consultation, they were on about more cuts to the council tax scheme, which was basically a lie. But again, that's something. If you shouldn't be using the consultation to misrepresent and force your scheme.
Yeah, I think to be fair on the tendering one, you were quite right. Those questions were open. They weren't closed, and they weren't particularly designed to invite in people with, shall we say, rather interesting views. But I think that's one of the reasons why the response to that particular question was so poor, because I don't think people really quite knew how to answer it as an open question. Okay, Sean, did you have anything else to add?
No, I'm okay.
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks for your contribution. And did we say Lynn? Lynn?
Yeah, hi again. I'd be interested, Naomi, how did you publicise the consultation? Did you send out to all council taxpayers, or?
We set up where we've got e-notifications. We had splash screens on that. We had whenever anyone phoned the authority, there was stuff on the phone lines. It was on the website. We put something on the notification letters during the consultation period. We contacted local support groups. So the council's got a whole list of equality and diversity groups. Crikey, who else did we do?
So you spread it quite wide.
Yeah, but we did fall short of emailing or sending out a post out to every council taxpayer. We tried to get as many people in as reasonable a way as possible. But we also wanted to make sure that we contacted and kept in the loop other council taxpayers.
Okay. No,
and we consulted with all of the preceptors, because obviously what we do has an impact on them.
Yeah, that's interesting. Thank you.
Okay, that's brilliant, Naomi. Thanks very much. And I suspect, Kevin, that you did much the same, didn't you? We lost Kevin.
He's muted still.
Sorry, we did very much the same. Sorry, Malcolm. We did very much the same. We didn't go to all council taxpayers, but we did far and wide, including the advice agencies.
Okay, that's brilliant. I knew you'd done the advice agencies.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. On that basis, as Nick pointed out, we have gone on longer than our allotted time, but as we haven't lost anybody, hopefully this was a useful conversation. You know, if we want to do more of the same of this and certainly open it up, I welcome everybody's involvement. So if you're not a member of the WhatsApp group, I know some of you aren't or can't be, but I'll try and send out emails to try and supplement some of this stuff as well. But if you want to join the WhatsApp group, then there is a link inside the slides. On the subject of the slide pack, I'm going to have a look at the slide pack and weed out some of it. We're up to about 150 slides in the slide covering all the things that we've discussed over previous weeks. So I'll send this one out for 150, and I'll probably start to cut some out for the following weeks. Okay, and that's where we are. See you all next week. Hope you have a good week, and thank you very much to Kevin and Naomi and Gareth and Liz, and also to all of you who came in on the discussion, Lynn, Sean, amongst others. Okay, thank you all, and see you all next week.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye-bye.
Goodbye.
Bye.